1. Let me tell you about this sweet 1961 Chevy C10 Apache I found on Craigslist. At $11,900, or best offer, this classic pickup is definitely worth a look. The seller's claiming it's rust-free, which is pretty remarkable for a 60-year-old truck. That's a huge plus right there. With only 28,000 miles showing on the odometer, though at this age it's likely rolled over, and an automatic transmission making it easy to drive, this C10 could be a great find. The seller mentions it's got lots of new parts, which is promising, though I wish they'd specified exactly what's been replaced. These C10s are becoming increasingly popular among collectors and restorers, and their values have been climbing steadily. The Apache was Chevy's base model, but don't let that fool you. These trucks are absolute workhorses with timeless styling. The asking price seems fair for a rust-free example in today's market, especially if those new parts include any major mechanical components. Just remember to give it a thorough inspection before pulling the trigger. These old trucks can hide surprises, and the seller's description is pretty brief. Still, if everything checks out, this could be a solid investment or a great classic daily driver. 2. Let's talk about this 1967 Chevy C20 that's popped up on Craigslist for $14,500. This is one of those classic workhorses that's gotten some love. The seller says it's been restored and is rocking an orange paint job. Under the hood, you've got the reliable V8 power plant, paired with a manual transmission. That's the authentic classic truck experience right there. With 57,603 miles on the clock, though at this age it could have rolled over, and a clean title, it's looking promising. The C20 was Chevy's 3/4-ton pickup, making it beefier than its C10 little brother, which means it's built extra tough. The seller claims it runs and drives well, which is crucial, but I've got to be honest, the description is pretty bare bones, and we definitely want to see those promised additional pictures. At $14,500, the price isn't outrageous for a restored C20 in today's market. But you'd want to inspect that restoration work carefully. Get underneath, check the frame, and see just how deep that restoration really went. These trucks are getting harder to find in good condition, and if the work's been done right, this could be a solid investment. Just make sure to do your due diligence before pulling the trigger. 3. Let me tell you about this absolute gem, a 1965 Ford Falcon Ranchero Deluxe that's got me genuinely excited. At $28,000, this isn't your average classic car listing. This is something special. Let's dive into why this one's worth getting hyped about. First off, we're looking at a numbers-matching example with the legendary 289 V8 and a 3-speed column shift auto. That's the good stuff. What really catches my attention is the incredibly low 49,000 original miles and the extensive love this car has received over 35 years of ownership. The sellers invested more than $40K in this beauty, and they've got the receipts to prove it. The upgrades are seriously impressive. A custom interior with a Falcon logo console, over $10K just in interior work, modern electrical upgrades including a new fuse box, disc brake conversion, and some really thoughtful additions like LED ambient lighting and a Rhino-lined bed. They've even kept period-correct AC components, though currently disconnected. What makes this Ranchero extra special is that it's a rust-free example of the deluxe model. These are getting incredibly hard to find, especially in this condition. The seller's honest about the front bright work needing some polishing, which I appreciate. The red paint looks sharp with those baby moon wheels, and the combination of utility and style is just perfect. 4. Let me tell you about this absolute beast of a 1968 Ford F-100 Ranger that's caught my eye. At $29,000, or best offer, we're looking at a seriously well-built classic truck that's got both show and go. This isn't your average F-100. We're talking about a California-Arizona truck that's been restored and modified with some serious thought behind it. Under the hood, there's a worked 390 V8 that's been bored and stroked, topped with Edelbrock heads and intake, breathing through a Holley 4-barrel carb. The MSD ignition and long tube headers with Flowmaster dual exhaust setup tells me this truck means business. The drivetrain is just as impressive with a C6 automatic, featuring a mild shift kit, and a bulletproof Ford 9-inch rear end. Modern amenities include power steering and power four-wheel disc brakes. That's a huge upgrade for safety and drivability. Plus, it's got AC, which is a major bonus for a classic truck. At $29K, you're getting a professionally restored truck with serious performance upgrades and all the right modern conveniences. The seller's description suggests real pride in ownership, and the fact that it's mechanic-owned typically means it's been maintained properly. For someone looking for a classic F100 that can both turn heads and lay down some serious power, this could be a solid buy. Just make sure to get a good look at that restoration work and maybe a test drive to feel that built 390 in action. 5. Let's talk about this 1978 Chevy Silverado square body that's up for grabs at $7,250. Now, this is one of those honest, straightforward listings that gives us some important details to work with. What we've got here is a classic 4x4 square body with some significant mechanical refreshing done. The seller's been upfront about the key stuff. They've put in a newer 350 Chevy engine, box stock, which means it's reliable and straightforward, and the turbo 400 transmission has been professionally rebuilt with a heavy-duty torque converter that still carries a warranty. That's pretty reassuring. The axles have also been professionally rebuilt, which is crucial for a 4x4 of this age. The brown paint gives it that classic 70s vibe, and importantly, the seller mentions it's never been wrecked. Now we should note that the odometer is broken, so there's no way to verify the actual mileage, something to keep in mind. However, it's currently registered in California and has passed smog, which is actually pretty impressive for a truck of this age. At $7,250, considering today's inflated classic truck market, this could be a decent deal, especially with those major mechanical components being refreshed. These square bodies are becoming increasingly popular, and finding one that's mechanically sorted with a clean title isn't easy. Just remember to check for the usual square body rust spots and verify all those rebuild claims. But for someone looking for a classic 4x4 with some recent mechanical work, this could be a solid buy. 6. Let's be real about this 1964 Chevy C10 that's listed for $4,000. I've got to give the seller credit for being honest. They're upfront about this being a fair condition truck, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. The good news first, it's got the desirable V8 engine paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, which is a fun combination, and the seller says it runs good, with 78,000 miles showing, though at this age, who knows if that's original. At least it's still on the road. Now let's address the elephant in the room. There's rust in the cab roof, which the seller specifically points out. This is actually a pretty serious issue because roof rust on these C10s often means there's moisture trapped in other areas too. When you see roof rust, it's usually just the tip of the iceberg. At $4,000, you're buying a project truck here, folks. While these C10s are super popular and values are climbing, this one needs work. However, if you're handy with a welder and looking for a classic truck project that you can drive while you restore, this could be a decent starting point. The price reflects the condition, and at least you're getting a running, driving classic with a clean title. Just make sure to thoroughly inspect all the usual rust spots, cab corners, floor pans, bed, and frame, before pulling the trigger. Sometimes these old trucks can surprise you with how much work they really need. 7. Let me tell you about this interesting 1960 Chevy C20 that's popped up for $5,500 in Perris, California. This is one of those finds that makes vintage truck hunters perk up their ears. What we've got here is a genuine California one-owner truck, which is pretty remarkable for a 63-year-old vehicle. It's powered by the trusty 283 V8 paired with a 4-speed manual. That's a robust, no-nonsense combination that these trucks were famous for. With 90,000 miles showing, it's clearly been used, but not abused. Being a C20, this is the 3/4-ton model, which means it's built tougher than its C10 sibling. The fact that it's a California truck is a big plus, as these typically suffer less from the rust issues that plague trucks from other regions. The white paint gives it that classic work truck look. At $5,500, considering today's inflated classic truck market, this could be a decent deal for someone looking for an authentic piece of American truck history. The sellers being pretty straightforward, though I wish they'd provided more details about the truck's current mechanical condition and any restoration work that might have been done. Remember, this is a 60-plus-year-old work truck, so expect it to need some attention. But the one-owner history and California origins make it an intriguing prospect. For someone looking to get into classic trucks without breaking the bank, this could be a solid starting point. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection before making the deal. 8. Let me tell you about this sweet 1976 Chevy G20 Beauville Sport Van that's up for grabs at $6,000. This is one of those classic vans that's getting harder to find in decent condition, and this one seems to have been kept up pretty well. What we're looking at here is a Beauville. That was the premium passenger van trim level, and it's rocking the robust 350 V8 with a 4-barrel carb and dual exhaust, which should give it plenty of grunt. The seller's highlighting some important points. The original interior is in good shape, which is rare for these old vans, and they claim the body is dent-free with shiny chrome. Even better, they mention the roof gutters are rust-free. That's a crucial detail because these vans often rot out in those areas first. With 123,000 miles on the clock, it's been used but not abused, and those new Michelin tires aren't a cheap addition. The power steering makes this big boy easier to maneuver, and that 39-gallon gas tank means you can cruise for miles between fill-ups. At $6,000, considering the current market for vintage vans, especially with the whole van life movement, this could be a solid deal. These G20S are built tough, and the Beauville trim adds some nice creature comforts. The fact that it appears well maintained with service records, mentioned in the inspection photos, is a big plus. For someone looking to get into the classic van scene or wanting a unique weekend cruiser with plenty of space, this could be a great option. Just make sure to check those usual van trouble spots: floor pans, lower body panels, and make sure that 350 is running as good as it sounds. 9. Let's talk about this 1982 GMC CK2500 that's popped up for $3,000, listed at $2,995. This is one of those old-school workhorses that's getting harder to find, especially with its original diesel power. What we've got here is a heavy-duty long bed with a 6.2L naturally aspirated diesel V8 paired to a 4-speed automatic transmission. These were built for work, not speed, and they're known for their reliability when maintained properly. With just 51,945 miles showing, this truck has surprisingly low mileage for its age, though as always with older vehicles, verify if that's accurate. The brown-tan color combination is classic early 80s GM, and being a C2500, it's built tougher than its half-ton siblings. These trucks were simple, sturdy, and relatively easy to work on. No computers or complex electronics to deal with. At $3,000, you're looking at an entry-level price for a heavy-duty classic truck. The 6.2L diesel isn't the powerhouse that modern diesels are, but it's known for being dependable and economical when properly maintained. However, being a 41-year-old diesel, you'll want to check for the usual issues: injection pump condition, glow plug system, and any signs of blow-by or excessive smoke. This could be a great project truck or work truck for someone who appreciates these old diesels and isn't afraid to turn a wrench. Just remember to give it a thorough inspection. Check for rust in the usual spots, make sure the transmission shifts properly, and verify the diesel engine's health before making a deal. 10. Let's talk about this 1985 GMC High Sierra 1500 that's listed for $12,500. I've got to be straight with you. This one needs some honest discussion. First, let's appreciate what we've got. It's a clean-looking square body with the original 4.3L V6 and a manual transmission, showing 100,600 miles. The seller's being refreshingly honest about the truck's condition and history. It's been pole-barned, stored in a pole barn, and hasn't seen winter use since the early 90s, which explains why it looks pretty clean for its age. Now, here's where we need to talk real talk. The truck's been sitting for about 10 years until recently, and it's got some issues. The carb was serviced last summer, but it's still not running right in cold weather. Needs a choke adjustment and doesn't like cool temperatures. That's something you'll need to address if you want to daily drive it. At $12,500, I've got to say this price feels pretty steep for a non-V8 2WD truck with known carburetor issues, even in today's inflated market. Yes, these square bodies are getting popular, and this one's been saved from rust by staying out of the snow. But you're looking at a truck that needs some attention to be a reliable daily driver. If you're a square body enthusiast who loves the idea of a preserved original truck and doesn't mind sorting out the carb issues, this could be interesting. But I'd definitely try to negotiate that price down. Just remember, getting an old carbureted engine running right after a long storage period can sometimes uncover other issues that need addressing. 11. Let me tell you about this 1972 GMC Sierra 1500 that's up for $12,500. I've got to be honest, this listing leaves a lot of questions unanswered. What we know is that it's a half-ton long bed with a V8 engine that's been rebuilt, sporting a clean title and showing around 100,000 miles on the clock. The green paint gives it that classic 70s vibe. But here's where things get tricky. The seller's description is incredibly brief, only mentioning that the engine rebuild included too many parts to list, without actually listing any of them. At $12,500, we really need more information to determine if this is a fair deal. These early 70s GMCs are definitely desirable, and values have been climbing. But without knowing what work was done on the engine rebuild, what condition the body and interior are in, or how the transmission is holding up, it's hard to make a solid assessment. For potential buyers, you'll definitely want to ask some important questions. When was the engine rebuilt? What parts were used? How's the body underneath? Any rust issues? How's the interior holding up? These trucks are known for rust in the cab corners, rocker panels, and bed, so you'll want to check those areas carefully. This could be a great truck. The 72 GMCs are beautiful machines when they're right. But at this price point, you really need to do your homework and get more details about the rebuild and overall condition. Don't be afraid to ask questions and inspect thoroughly before making a move. 12. Let's talk about this 1972 Ford F-250 that's up for grabs at $3,850, and the seller needs to move it quickly. This one's got some interesting potential. What we've got here is a heavy-duty F-250 with the desirable factory 390 big block V8. That's a torque monster that these trucks came with from the factory. The power steering and front disc brake upgrades are nice features that make this old workhorse more manageable in daily use. With 77,000 miles showing, it's got some life under its belt, but still has plenty to give. The seller's coming from a 30-plus year ownership, which is usually a good sign. Long-term owners tend to take better care of their vehicles. They're being upfront about the old paint job. But here's what's really important. They mention the lower cab corners are in great condition, and the floors and rockers are solid. For these old Fords, that's crucial information, because these areas are notorious rust spots. At $3,850, considering you're getting a big block V8, solid body and clean title, this could be a pretty decent deal in today's market. Plus, they're throwing in extra mag wheels, which is a nice bonus. The quick sale need might explain the reasonable price point. For someone looking for a classic work truck project that's still drivable, or a foundation for a restoration that won't break the bank, this could be worth checking out. Just make sure to verify those body condition claims and give that 390 a good inspection. At this price point, you've got room to put some money into it if needed. 13. Let me tell you about this seriously well-built 1972 Chevy C10 stepside that's listed for $29,000. This isn't your average C10. This is a thoroughly thought-out build with some impressive details. Let's start with the foundation. It's a Georgia truck that's been living the good life in Minnesota, stored indoors and never seeing winter or rain. That explains why it's rust-free, which is huge for these trucks. The matte black paint gives it that modern custom look, and it's sitting right with those lowered springs and coils. Under the hood, you've got a 454 big block. While the mileage on the engine itself is unknown, the seller's honest about it not being a hot rod but a strong runner. What's really impressive is that nearly everything else on the truck has just 3,200 miles since being rebuilt or replaced, and they've got the receipts to prove it. The build list is extensive and well planned. Turbo 350 transmission, 3.73 rear gears, vintage AC that actually blows cold, that's rare, power steering and brakes, and dual electronic cooling fans with variable speed control. The interior is particularly impressive with leather and Alcantara, a custom lower position seat, Dakota digital gauges, and extensive sound insulation. This isn't just a pretty face, it's built for comfortable cruising. The seller's being refreshingly honest about the few quirks, like needing 4 pumps to start after storage and some minor oil seepage from cork gaskets when sitting. The fact that they drove it 24 hours straight from Georgia speaks volumes about its reliability. 14. Let me tell you about this 1985 Dodge W150 that's listed for $7,500. I've got to be honest, the seller's description is incredibly brief for a truck they're claiming is in excellent condition. What we know is that it's powered by the reliable 318 5.2L V8 engine, which is actually a strong point. These engines are known for their durability and are pretty much bulletproof when maintained. It's a 4x4, which adds value, and it's showing 244,000 miles on the clock. That's a lot of miles, but these old Dodges were built tough. Here's where things get interesting. The seller marks it as excellent condition, but provides absolutely no details about maintenance history, restoration work, or current mechanical condition. At $7,500, we really need more information to determine if this is a fair price. These W150S are getting harder to find, especially in good condition. But that mileage is pretty high. For potential buyers, you'll definitely want to ask some important questions. How's the 4x4 system working? Any rust issues? These were prone to cab corner and bed rust. Has the engine or transmission ever been rebuilt? How's the frame? The manual transmission is a plus for many enthusiasts, but you'll want to check the clutch condition at this mileage. This could be a solid truck. These mid-80s Dodges have a strong following, but I'd want a lot more details and a thorough inspection before committing to that $7,500 price tag. Don't be shy about asking for more information and documentation. 15. Let's talk about this interesting 1972 Chevy C10 that's up for $13,500. This isn't your typical C10. We've got a cool resto mod situation going on here. What makes this truck special is its heart transplant. It's running a 1985 IROC Z TPI, tuned port injection, engine paired with a 700 R4 automatic transmission. That's a smart upgrade that brings modern fuel injection reliability and the overdrive transmission for better highway cruising. If you know your Chevys, you'll appreciate that this combo is a significant improvement over the original setup. The seller claims the body is clean with no rust or dents, which is pretty impressive for a 51-year-old truck, especially considering these C10s were prone to rust issues. With 123,900 miles showing, it's been used but not abused. The fresh tires and brakes are definitely a plus, and they mention much more has been done, though I wish they'd specified what. At $13,500, considering today's market and the desirable engine transmission swap, this could be a fair deal if everything checks out. You're getting the classic C10 long bed looks with more modern running gear, which means better reliability and drivability than a stock 72. For potential buyers, you'll want to verify that engine swap was done properly. Check all the usual rust spots, even though they say there isn't any, and make sure that 700 R4 is shifting smoothly. The fact that it's registered with a clean title in hand is definitely a plus. 16. Let me tell you about this seriously impressive 1966 GMC Series 1000 short bed that's listed for $28,800. This is a high-level build that's about 75% complete, and the attention to detail is remarkable. Let's break down what makes this truck special. First off, this is a full frame-off restoration, and they've done it right. The entire body and cab were soda blasted to bare metal. No shortcuts here. They've smoothed out the bed by removing tailgate brackets and chains, and finished it in a beautiful two-tone paint scheme using original GMC turquoise and white, using quality PPG paint. The powertrain is where things get really interesting. It's running a professionally built 1995 5.7 L350 V8 from Phoenix Engine, complete with documentation and video. That's huge. It's paired with a JEG 700R4 transmission with a Boss Hog heavy-duty converter. That's a solid combination for both performance and reliability. The addition of the serpentine belt system, power steering, and AC shows this was built to be driven and enjoyed. The framework is particularly impressive. Professionally cut, braced, and welded, then powder-coated black. The suspension has been upgraded with heavy-duty components and power disc brakes up front, and they've modernized the rear end with an 83 GM differential. At $28,800, even though it's not complete, you're buying into a professional-grade build where most of the expensive and difficult work has already been done. The sellers even included a detailed list of new uninstalled parts, though it was cut off in the description. 17. Let me tell you about this eye-catching 1972 Chevy C10 stepside that's listed for $26,000. This is one of those builds that definitely catches your attention. First off, the seller's right. The 72 short bed stepside is indeed one of the most desirable body styles for these C10s. The dark green metal flake paint inside and out is a bold choice that sets it apart, and they're claiming the body is perfectly straight with no rust, which is crucial for these trucks. What we've got here is a nicely customized example with some thoughtful modifications. It's been lowered with new coil springs, features custom grille and bumpers, and sits on chrome rims with newer tires. The interior has been redone and they've upgraded to power front disc brakes, though they're honest about the rear brakes needing some attention. Now here's where things get interesting. The engine situation is a bit of a mystery. The seller admits they're not sure about the engine specs, but notes it runs strong and doesn't think it's stock. With 5,700 miles showing, this is likely since the restoration or rebuild. At $26,000, you're paying for a show-quality custom C10 in one of the most desirable configurations. However, I'd want to know more about that engine and get some documentation about the work that's been done. The honesty about the rear brakes needing attention is actually refreshing. It suggests the seller is being straight about the truck's condition. 18. Let me tell you about this really honest 1971 Chevy C10 short bed that's up for $15,000. What we've got here is a pretty special find. A largely original truck with documented family history and low original miles. Let's appreciate what makes this one interesting. It's a factory short bed fleet side, the desirable configuration, with just 57K original miles, coming from the original family's ownership. The 350/350ths powertrain combo is bulletproof, and the seller's being refreshingly honest about every aspect of the truck. The good stuff? It's almost entirely rust-free, with previous proper repairs to the rockers and floorboards. The seller's done some solid mechanical updates, including MagnaFlow exhaust, new master cylinder, fuel pump, water pump, and an aluminum radiator. The previous owner added some nice upgrades like an Edelbrock Performer intake and carb, plus fresh brakes and shocks. At $15,000, considering today's market for original short bed C10s, this seems pretty fair. You're getting a solid, unmolested truck with known history, low miles, and recent mechanical work. The fact that it hasn't been cut or lowered keeps all options open for the next owner, whether they want to restore it to original specs or customize it. 19. Let me tell you about this 1979 Chevy Scottsdale that's listed for $8,000. Though I notice there's some confusion in the listing as they mention it's a 76 in the description. Let's work with what we know. What we've got here is a classic square-body Chevy with the desirable short bed configuration, powered by a V8 engine and backed by an automatic transmission. The listing shows 119,000 miles, but there's an important note. The odometer is broken, so the actual mileage is unknown. The truck wears blue paint and is being sold with a clean title. However, I've got to be honest. The seller's description is extremely brief, which leaves a lot of questions unanswered about the truck's condition, maintenance history, and any potential issues. At $8,000, we really need more information to determine if this is a fair deal. Square-body Chevys are hot in the market right now, especially short beds. But without knowing more about the mechanical condition, any rust issues, or interior condition, it's hard to make a solid assessment. The seller mentions delivery is available and seems emotionally attached, calling it my baby. But for potential buyers, you'll want to ask a lot more questions. How's the engine running? Any rust issues? Has any restoration work been done? What's the condition of the transmission? These are crucial details for a truck of this age. 20. Let me tell you about this interesting 1973 Ford F250 that's up for grabs at $4,250. This one's got some potential for the right buyer. What we've got here is a heavy-duty F250 powered by the robust 390 big block V8, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. That's a strong, no-nonsense combination that these trucks were famous for. The odometer shows 23,700 miles. But the seller's honest about not knowing the true mileage, especially since the truck sat for 20 years. The good news is that someone's put in the work to get this truck running right again. We're talking about a fresh battery, new ignition components, cap, rotor, plugs, wires, and coil, a rebuilt carburetor, and a cooling system flush. That's a good start for bringing a long-stored vehicle back to life. At $4,250, considering today's inflated classic truck market, this could be a decent deal for someone looking for a project that's already running. The 394-speed combo is desirable, and having a clean Colorado title is a plus. Colorado trucks tend to have less rust than many other regions. However, any truck that's sat for 20 years is going to need attention. While the seller's done the basic revival work, you'll want to check things like brake lines, fuel lines, suspension components, and all the usual rust spots. These old Fords are built tough, but 2 decades of sitting can take its toll.